Hi, and welcome to Hangout on Air series. Today we're going to talk about mobile websites. My name is Kelsey.
My name's Ian.
And again, this is a mSite Hangout on Air, basically just to talk about principles and best practices for design for mobile websites. So just to remind you guys, this is a live event, so we are broadcasting currently live. So feel free to ask your questions in the comments section below for the advertiser community. So today, I just want to go over a couple of topics. So this is our today's agenda. As you can see, we have several different areas we'll be leading you into. So let's go ahead and get started with the first one, which is the mobile moment. So what is the mobile moment? So this is, we don't actually go online anymore, we live online. So we are in the midst of the largest shift in consumer behavior since the induction of the web itself. Every day, billions of people around the globe are living out their lives across multiple screens and devices. So for example, I know that between me and my roommate, we actually have 5 laptops, which is a lot. However, whenever I'm at home just browsing, I'm always on my mobile phone. Our phones, which were once simple devices for making calls, are more like our personal assistants today. 2/3 of mobile phone users sleep with their phones by their bed, myself included. I'm pretty guilty of that.
I'm definitely guilty of that too.
And we've become so reliant on phones that people turn to their phones for advice rather than their friends. And so what this means for us and for you guys is that our constant connectivity translates to more opportunities than ever before for brands to connect with their users. So this brings us to that idea of the mobile moment. So as you can see here, there's a couple statistics on the slide. All of these statistics come from credible research firms and reports from companies such as the Nielsen, ComScore, and Business Insider. We also use stats from reports created using our own company data. There are a couple of things that I wanted to highlight on this slide that I think will make the most impact. So for example, as of May 2015, more Google searches take place on mobile devices than on computers in 10 countries, including the US and Japan. 52% of consumers are less likely to engage with a company if their site is not mobile friendly. And on the other hand, 67% of consumers are more likely to convert on a mobile optimized site. So this means you guys have a lot of freedom and a lot of range to go ahead and go out and capture this mobile data. And so this mobile moment is a kind of a multi-device consumer cycle, and you can actually contribute to any touch point on this cycle here. The 4 are discovery, research, purchase, and fulfill. So just kind of takeaways from this. So mobile is really leading the way. This year was actually the first year I do believe that Google saw that mobile surpassed desktop searches. And 63.4% of total digital ad spend will go to mobile in 2016. As I kind of alluded to earlier in my example, users are omni-device. So as agencies, both you and your clients must be ready for mobile as users discover, research, consider, and purchase. And the presentation and usefulness matter. So users are really averted to sites that aren't well mobily designed or aren't mobily optimized. And they actually demonstrate that they increase their conversion rate, want to interact more with your website when it is mobile friendly. So it's really going to matter moving into this new sphere. So now I'm going to go ahead and change it on over to Ian for the mobile impact on PPC.
Thanks, Kelsey. So next up in our agenda today is mobile's impact on pay-per-click. So we've already seen that mobile has changed the way that users interact with content online, conduct searches on Google, make purchases, do research. But now let's talk about how it's impacted marketing, advertising in the pay-per-click world. Just want to point out a couple different statistics here. These came from a Think with Google study this past year, as well as the Merkle Marketing Agency study from 2016. A couple really important stats, 88%, that is the percentage of near me searches that are coming from mobile relative to other devices this year, and that's up 146% year over year. So as the user adoption of mobile as the primary search device increases, so too does the mobile relevancy and near me searches as well. Diving into Merkle's findings for mobile's impact on their client base, 95% of all paid search clicks that came from phones were generated by Google in Q1 of this year, and that's up 86% from a year ago. Mobile's impact also wasn't just felt on search, it was felt in PLAs as well. Mobile accounted for 43% of Merkle's retail clients' overall ad search clicks, and that spend rose 41% year over year as well. But optimizing your strategy for mobile has numerous benefits just beyond the fact that it's impacting the industry. For one, many consumers aren't brand committed. 90% of smartphone users aren't absolutely certain of a brand that they want to look for when they want to buy or get information online. I am definitely of that camp. If I go online, I'm looking for something immediately in the now, and it doesn't necessarily matter what the brand name is. I just need the info, right? You also get a shot at your competitors' customers. So 1 in 3 smartphone users have purchased from a company other than the brand that they intended to because of the information that they provided in that moment. And it's not just getting a shot at the customers. Your presence alone can drive brand awareness. Studies have shown you can actually increase unaided brand awareness by 46% simply by showing up in mobile search ad results.
Yeah, I know, especially the brand awareness piece is pretty key. I know personally from my own life example, I'm going tubing this weekend, and I realized on Monday, oh my gosh, I don't actually have any tubes. So I immediately went on my phone, as I usually am on my couch, and really just had no idea, like even brands, what would be out there. And I really went with the website that was giving me the best options. It was the quickest and the easiest to purchase, as well as showing me the best deals. So you can really expand into this space if you have that information, if you have the cheapest prices, if you have the best deals. Really expanding into that and capturing that audience, I think, is really key.
Yep, so the takeaway here is mobile audiences are actionable and they're immediate, and you get a shot at them if you just show up.
Exactly.
So now that we've talked about, the changing sentiment of consumer searching with the mobile moment, we've talked about mobile's impact on the pay-per-click industry and how marketing and advertising firms, like many of you watching right now, are seeing mobile's impact on your client base. Let's talk about your mobile place. So where do you start now that you have all this information? And let's go to Kelsey.
Awesome, thanks, Ian. So again, as he alluded to, so kind of where do you start? So you have this idea, mobile is going to be important. So how do you attack this with your clients? So here, where you're going to start is really depend on the client's business model, resources, and goals, especially the resources. I think that's probably the biggest factor in where you're going to determine this. So we have 3 different types of areas where you can start. The first here is app-centric. So this is really for clients that have a really high volume of clients and as well as a high return user base. So you want people that are going to be repeatedly engaging with your apps. Because as we all know, the lifeline of an app is how many return users that they have. Learned that on Silicon Valley last Sunday. It was a really big centric model. So this is intended, again, for high frequency use, delivering app-only capabilities. So for example, if you need to access pictures or do things offline, it's really a good one. And it's mostly used for entertainment, media, or gaming usage.
Yep.
The next one is site first. So this is going to be ideal for most companies, particularly for the agencies. This is really to be fully optimized for mobile, as well as fully functional core capabilities like e-commerce or form fill-outs or getting quotes, things like that. And this is built with your future customer base in mind. So again, this is going to be most of your advertisers are going to want to start making sure that their websites are mobile friendly. And then you do have a combination of the both, which is site and apps. This is for companies who have already really nailed their mobile presence and are looking to expand into something like an app, or vice versa. If your company really has nailed the app and really wants to expand out to more fully functioning capabilities, such as a mobile website. This will be the least amount, kind of like an overlapping Venn diagram, really going to be the least amount of advertisers you're going to see that are going to need this. So let's just go ahead and dive into each one of these. The first one is what we call an mSite. So there's some pros and cons here, as you can see. It's really easy to transition from a desktop site to a mobile-friendly site, especially if you're using adaptive or responsive design. It is a lower upkeep versus apps in terms of costs and developments pushed. So when you push a development live on the website, it'll be available immediately. No user interaction really is really required. And this is usually the first place the majority of your customer base will engage. So again, this is ideal for most advertisers, all businesses looking to acquire new users and local businesses. There are a couple cons here though. First one is that the internet access is required. So in order to get on the mobile website, you will have to have internet access. E-commerce transactions might be a little bit more bumpy than you're typically used to, and they might take more time. And the user info isn't cached unless a user is logged in, which makes mSites harder for high volume repeat users. And then we move over to the apps. So the pros of this is, again, ability to leverage that loyal customer base to continually interact with your website, or with your app, and frequently engage with your business. The speed and the ease of use, we often see that apps are a little bit faster just because they have more streamlined information versus a typical mSite, and has a really broad functionality. So you can include a lot of features in the apps, such as accessing photos, saving user details, even taking things offline. However, the cons I think are really important to highlight, and this is why it's not ideal for most businesses, is the higher development costs. So with apps, you really have to nail the design in order to get that repeat customer base. I mean, I know that we probably all once in our life have experienced an app that wasn't made to the best of its abilities, and how likely are you to pick up that app again? So the high development costs really lend itself to the cons of this, which is why it's usually not ideal for most businesses. And like I said, the design is crucial as well. With the updates are a little bit harder to push. So if you push an update, the user actually has to go in and manually update the app itself. So they might not even see those updates. The last one, again, we kind of had that Venn diagram crossing over, was what about both? So having both an mSite and an app is ideal for businesses that have solidified their desktop presence and want to develop their mobile and web capabilities while adding new functionalities. So again, this is going to be a really comprehensive, wide-scoping business that will have frequently engaged users that return over and over again, but also do want to keep their presence on the mobile mSites up and running. All right, so we're going to take this time and see. So we're having a little bit of technical issues with our questions earlier, so let me see if we can actually reach those. But this is the time we're going to take and see if we can take a couple questions here from our audience.
Yep, we're going to take a quick look for you guys.
Okay, just taking a look here. All right, so it looks like we don't have any questions just yet. Again, like I said, we were having a little bit of technical issues. Imagine that, Google having technical issues. I'm sure the advertisers are familiar with sometimes that can happen, but we're going to go ahead and move on, but to continue, if you do have any questions about the content, feel free to leave them and we'll try to get to them at the very end of the presentation. So let's go ahead and pass it back to Ian for the principles of mSite design.
All right, everybody, thanks for hanging in. This is really the meat and potatoes of today's session, the principles of mSite design. So we're going to go over basically what makes a good mobile site, right? So Google and Answer Lab hosted a 119-hour in-person study with sessions in Chicago and San Francisco. And basically what we did is we tasked participants with completing a conversion-focused task across both iOS and Android OS sites. Participants visited various different sites, and basically we had them complete a purchase or sign up for a newsletter, book a flight, or reserve a hotel room. And then for each website, we asked them to basically rate and give us their thoughts along that process. And then we also provided insights into the site experience, and they let us know like how successful they were with the tasks, and we logged errors as they came along. And we basically came away with these 5 principles for mSite design. So we have homepage and site navigation, site search, commerce and conversions, form entry, and usability and form factor. So the first one, we're going to get into homepage and site navigation. So the first principle here is keeping calls to action front and center. You guys want to make sure to feature your primary calls to action in the most prominent space on the site, which is usually above the fold. So we have sort of a best-in-class example here. Obviously, the conversion action or the call to action is get a quote, right? You want to make sure that this is the most prominent part of the page. Study participants from the study I cited earlier had the easiest time completing tasks on sites that clearly displayed the primary calls to actions above the fold or in the main body of the site, with secondary tasks available beneath the fold, like menus, for example. The next principle is keep menus short and sweet. A shorter, more distinct menu is going to be easier for mobile users to navigate and easier to make selections on. So consider, as you're designing your mobile website from your full desktop website, how you can present the fewest menu items possible, but still get the biggest return possible. So for example, here, a major department store refined the product categories on its mobile site, presenting study participants with a shorter, more clearly defined list than a desktop site might have. The next principle is don't let promotions steal the show. So recall earlier that a best practice is to make sure that your calls to actions are front and center, but don't let promotions overshadow them, right? Make sure they don't interfere with not only the calls to action, but navigation as well. Again, participants visiting one company's website were actually distracted by a large promotional banner, and they actually missed navigational options beneath it. You don't want that to happen. You don't want to make it any harder than it already is to browse a mobile website. So keep them beneath the fold, away from your calls to action. Again, it's still important to include them, but just don't make them the primary focus and steal the show from your calls to action. So now that we've gone over homepage and site navigation, I'm going to pass it over to Kelsey, and she's going to take you guys through site search.
Awesome, thanks, Ian. So let's go ahead. The first principle here is making the site search visible. So mobile users are looking for specific information or products tend to use the site search functionality to find what they're looking for. So if you've never actually seen this, as you can see here in the best-in-class example, typically they'll display a small search bar where you can type in things to kind of quickly get to the products exactly what you're looking for. So in our studies, participants responded best to easily visible open text search boxes versus search icons or logos. So while we might think that the magnifying glass, especially here at Google, automatically denotes search, not everyone knows that. So just actually putting the text box there is the most universal way to let them know that there's a site search functionality. The next principle here is ensure that those site search results are actually relevant. So again, seems a little obvious here, but in our study, once a site search was complete, participants didn't bother to swipe through multiple pages of search results. Instead, they just judged the site search based on the results that returned first. So often, like Google, sometimes getting to the second or third page isn't just really an option, especially on mobile. So return those results that are really relevant at the top and make sure that they are relevant to whatever the user is searching. You can also improve the site search by making life easier for users on small screens with larger fingers, with smart search features like autocomplete or corrected misspellings.
Yep.
So basically make it as much as Google that you possibly can, and you'll be fine. Another great tip here is to implement filters to improve mobile site search usability. So in our study, participants relied on the filters to narrow down the search results, and they actually abandoned sites that couldn't reduce their volume. So keep in mind that when you are implementing some of these filters, that you actually don't ensure that users can filter themselves into a box, or that the filters are actually going to filter out results. So nothing is really more intimidating than being on a mobile site and seeing thousands of search results or thousands of product results,
yeah,
and no way to filter that down. Again, they're not going to really go through hundreds and hundreds of pages. And we also want to make sure that they're not filtering something that will return absolutely no results, because that would seem very frustrating, at least in my opinion.
Definitely.
And also just guide these users to better search results. So it can be helpful to ask users a couple of questions before they actually search to ensure that they get the best results here. As you can see in our best-in-class example, they were actually asking about shoes, and they asked them what gender as well as the size. This can be extremely helpful, again, with hundreds and hundreds of products there. If you know that, for example, I only want to wear a size 7.5 for women's, which is my actual shoe size, I only want to see sandals that I can actually buy. It wouldn't make a lot of sense for me to actually buy a sandal that doesn't come in my own size. So now we're going to pass it back over to Ian, and he's going to cover commerce and conversions.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelsey. So next principle here is letting users explore before they commit. So you want to allow users to visit your site without having to register for an account before they look at information. So placing registration gates too early in the site experience can be detrimental to your conversion bottom line, right? In the study I cited before, participants were frustrated by sites that forced them to sign up for an account in order to continue, especially if it was an unfamiliar brand. So recall that statistic from earlier, 90% of mobile users aren't necessarily brand committed when searching online. You don't want to make it even harder by forcing them to sign up before they even look at your content, right? You do get a shot at customers, and they're not necessarily brand committed. So don't make it any harder than it has to be, and don't force them to sign up before exploring content. Let them explore without having to register for an account. They want to get a sense for what you have to offer before opting in. Quite similarly to registering for an account before exploring is let them purchase as a guest. So offer the option to check out as a guest and encourage registration with tangible benefits. So in the study, even when participants were making a purchase, they didn't necessarily want to commit to creating an account with that particular company. So participants that went on sites that had guest checkout described it as convenient, simple, easy, and quick. These are all adjectives you want to be associated with your mobile site experience. So they were also actually annoyed that a site required registration to purchase, especially since it didn't explain how registration would benefit them. If you're in a unique scenario where you have to have a customer register before checking out, be very upfront with the tangible benefits that they're going to get by registering for an account if it's completely unavoidable. If you can, just let them check out as a guest. It's a much simpler and streamlined experience. Speaking of streamlining, the next is using existing information to maximize convenience. So take advantage, if you have it, of the information that you have on hand, or use third-party payment information to make conversions as easy as possible. So for registered users, if you have cached information, just pre-fill their preferences, right, in these form fields. For new users, offer a third-party checkout service that they might already use, for example, like PayPal, right, to pre-fill preferences in there. Several retail sites that were included in our study offered third-party payment options, which reduced payment friction for users and it allowed their site to pre-fill all the information. So again, this is just making the process as easy and painless as possible for users on your mobile site. Next is using click-to-call buttons for complex tasks. So offering a prominent click-to-call button can keep users from dropping out of your guys' conversion funnel when they need to provide complex information. So for example, if your business requires a user to submit like a social security number and they may not necessarily be comfortable doing that online, offer them an out by giving them like a click-to-call button, for example. So participants actually appreciated the option to call a financial services company, for those of you who might have clients in the finance vertical, to complete an action over the phone rather than filling out a complicated form on the mobile device. So give them the option, if it does require sensitive information or more intensive engagement with the site, to call the company and talk directly with someone. And next is make it easy to finish converting on another device. So as Kelsey alluded to earlier in the on-the-device journey, mobile can be a part of any one of those touch points: the research, the discovery, the purchase. Again, they may be researching to convert later, so offer a simple way to resume the journey on another device at another point, right? So users across multiple devices throughout the course of the study appreciated the fact that websites offered the opportunity to basically just pick up where they left off. For example, if they started on a mobile phone and went home later in the day and then completed the purchase on their laptop or their tablet, they really appreciated that fact. So give them the opportunity to convert on another device if possible.
I've seen that really be a key for, I think, for retail, especially the save to cart functionality. I know that, again, always on my phone here, saving that and then being able to go back and maybe even getting a finer look or even like a second opinion definitely helped. And I would say I convert almost all the time when I have the option to save it to my cart, especially if the company sends me reminder emails. I get those a lot as well. Like, something's in your cart, make sure you purchase it. So
yeah, don't let users drop out of the funnel by not giving them the on-the-device approach, basically, to completing a conversion.
Exactly.
So now that we've gone over e-commerce and conversions, I'm going to pass it back over to Kelsey, and she's going to talk about form entry.
Great, awesome. So the biggest thing here, again, I feel like these are a little bit on the nose, but I don't think they would be a problem repeating. We want to make sure we get this in because these sound like something that every user would know, but maybe you don't even realize when you're designing a site here. So the first one here is streamline information entry. So if you're going to be having users fill in those fields, kind of as Ian talked about, a lot of forms, and you don't want to have them give a call, just make sure that you're streamlining this information. So participants were really pleased when sites automatically presented a number pad, for example, when you're trying to enter in things like zip codes or birth dates or things like that. Oftentimes, I know for iPhone especially, you have to switch back and forth between the actual keyboard and the number pad. Luckily, Android has already kind of fixed that issue, but I know for some Apple users, that's a really big pain point, and having to switch back and forth, especially typing in something wrong and having to go back, can be a huge pain. And participants also appreciated forms that automatically advanced through fields as they entered information. Conversely, they got frustrated when they had to repeatedly tap small form fields and switch their phone keyboard to the numeric mode, as I mentioned earlier. Also, make sure that you choose this simplest input method for each task. As you can see here in this best-in-class example, there are some things that, like, for example, birth dates, that we have a set number of options to choose from. And so making that the easiest way to choose, instead of having us type in everything manually for like countries, states, things like dates, will really kind of help save time. And again, participants really enjoyed the choices with limited options, being able to actually tap it instead of having to type it in. This one is huge for me in particular. So provide a visual calendar when selecting dates. So this is really huge for traveling and ticketing, and I've been traveling a lot lately, and it's really frustrating when I don't actually have a visual calendar to tell me when next weekend will be or when the 14th actually lies on. So providing that calendar and having them to be able to choose from that is huge, again, especially for traveling websites. I'm a little bit, in terms of attention span, a little shorter on the attention span side. So if I have to switch between this website, go back to my calendar, go back to my email, I'll remember that I saw something on my calendar that I hadn't planned for, and then I'm not on the website anymore. So just go ahead and provide that calendar. It again eases users' form entry information. Minimizing form errors with labeling and real-time validation. So label your forms clearly and make sure that the labels are visible when users are actually entering information. So one of our participants mistakenly entered his street address into the email address field only because the field address was available. And this is, again, real-time validation is also another big key thing here. So if your system is able to recognize that, for example, a zip code shouldn't be 10 digits, go ahead and make sure that you highlight that they entered that in incorrectly. That can be really helpful when going through a very long form fill, and then you get to the end and submit and realize that you had like 1 digit off on one of your things, something that could be very frustrating for a user.
Yeah, this is even more effective when you couple it with the principle from e-commerce and conversions talking about pre-filling users' information. This can help reduce errors, obviously, but again, we're all human, right? Errors are going to happen. This is also important to couple along with existing information if you guys have it cached for your users.
Exactly, especially because mobile phone screens are so small.
Yep.
Some of us are blessed with tiny little fingers to be able to type on there.
Not me.
The last one here is designing efficient forms. So only make as many fields as necessary, kind of what Ian alluded to earlier. And if that isn't possible, give that user that option to give you a call to kind of speak over the phone. For example, a big one is don't make users actually select the type of credit card when you already know what the credit card is going to be based on the first couple of entries. And again, take advantage of autofill. It is a magical feature that I think will save a lot of time for your users. And this is a really huge one. When you have some multi-part forms that you know you're going to have multiple pages for, make sure that you give some sort of progress bar. Nothing can be more intimidating than seemingly answer page after page after page of questions and not really sure when you're going to end. So just keep it a progress bar, whether that's the actual steps that you have to take or even a percentage of the way complete. That will make sure that your users don't drop out thinking they still have to fill things out when they're actually on the last step.
Yep.
So I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Ian. I think this is the last one.
I believe so, yeah.
All right, awesome.
So we're going to go through usability and form factor as our final grouping of principles here. So first, optimize your entire site for mobile. That seems like a no-brainer based on the theme of today's Hangout, but some advertisers, agencies may actually only optimize the most actionable parts of their page for mobile, for example, like the conversion or cart process. Unsurprisingly, participants had a harder time navigating mobile optimized sites that were like a mixture of both. So it's actually worse to part optimize your site for mobile, part for desktop. It's actually more cumbersome for users, especially the participants in our study. So if you're going to take the leap and design a mobile website, dive all the way in, don't just dip a toe, right? So make sure everything is optimized for mobile. Next is not making your users pinch to zoom. So visitors can miss calls to action if they have to zoom in on a site. So you want to ensure to design your site so that they never need to. Again, we've already talked about balancing calls to actions with interstitials and other different promotions on the page. So if you've nailed that, don't make users have to pinch to zoom. Participants in the study from before were frustrated when they needed to zoom in or zoom out. Sometimes they missed important messaging or action items, or calls to action. So design it so your mobile users won't have to change the screen size. Some mobile sites even disable pinch to zoom, right, on their screen. So if your site is designed correctly, users aren't even going to know it's gone. This is actually a good plug for adaptive design, right, where you basically pre-configure your mobile process and serve it to users optimized for the device and the screen size. So if you're going to design a mobile website, adaptive design can help with the pinch to zoom issue. Next is make product images expandable. For those of you with clients in retail, hope you're listening to this one, including high quality close-ups of key images like product photos is really important, but make sure that they're also compressed and optimized to keep file sizes to a minimum, because you don't want to sacrifice form for functionality, right? So customers want to see what they're buying, obviously, especially if it's retail. On retail sites in the study, participants able to view high resolution images on the phone, got a better look at details. They appreciated that much more than sites that just served up a photo without the ability to take a closer look. Next is telling users which screen orientation works best. So you want to be upfront and communicate with users if your site works best in a particular orientation, but ensure that important calls to action work and can be completed regardless of orientation, right? Study participants tended to stay in the same orientation until something prompted them to switch. So that's something like watching a video, right? Or reading smaller text. You might want to change the orientation to get a better look. Either design for both landscape or portrait, or encourage users to switch to make sure they have the optimal screen rotation. But again, make sure that your important calls to action are present and can be completed regardless of which one they choose. Even if they ignore, right, your prompting to switch, you want to ensure that the process is still pretty seamless. Next is keeping your user in a single browser window. So again, ensuring calls to action are always present and in the same browser window, and add functionality to your site that addresses why consumers might switch windows. So switching between windows on a smartphone, again, can be a little troublesome sometimes. And it raises the risk that visitors leave your site completely. Again, Kelsey alluded to the example before. She has to switch to her email, for example. She might see something in her calendar and she might go and jump off and do something else, right? I'm guilty of this too, right? Multiple tabs open and you sort of lose track of what you're doing. So try to keep users in one place by avoiding calls to action that launch new windows. Like, for example, like participants oftentimes opened a new window to find like a coupon if they were looking at like a retail client. Can maybe consider offering those on your site, right? So they don't have to switch windows, they don't have to open a new window, so they can avoid looking elsewhere and you keep them all in one place.
Yeah, and I think that really seals the deal there. So if I go on a website and there's actually a coupon code right there, anytime I can save money, you're like hook, line, and sinker. I'm gonna buy your product.
Absolutely. Next is avoid full site labeling. So make it easy to switch between site experiences for users, but also use labels like desktop instead of full, to be clear that both sites offer a full experience, right? So when participants saw an option for full site versus mobile site, they assumed that the mobile site was more of a scaled down, condensed version of the full site, and they actually chose full site instead, which in this case actually meant desktop version, right? Obviously you want to avoid having users have to browse a desktop optimized site on their mobile device. So again, one participant even said, I prefer the desktop site could add so much more information, even though the mobile site had the same amount of information, the same exact offerings. It just said full site instead of desktop site. So use terms like desktop instead of full, so it's very clear what users are choosing, and make sure that they know that the site is going to be fully served to them on mobile as well. Next is be clear why you need a user's location. So for those of you with clients in the travel vertical, this is pretty important. Always make sure it's clear why you need a user's location and how that information is going to affect their experience. So users should always understand why you're asking for their location. Participants in the study that were looking at travel sites trying to book a hotel became confused when the site parsed their location and gave them results for hotels in the town that they were in, even though they were looking to travel somewhere else, right? So don't assume that the location they're in is the location where they're going to be looking for a particular product or service. Let users fill it in themselves and then serve them the most relevant results based on that.
Yeah, there's always a fine line between design. For example, in my earlier presentation, I said that autofill information that you already have. So it can definitely be helpful when you have a user's location to autofill that. But like as Ian said, for some verticals, it might not make sense, again, specifically for hotels or even travel, such as train or plane tickets.
Yep.
It might make sense for you to let the user give you that location or let them where they want to go. But again, for the other verticals, it might make sense actually to pre-fill things like shipping or their address,
Yep.
something about their location that would be helpful. So make sure that you just discuss with your client what you think the best outcome is going to be and what you're actually looking for before you go ahead and implement some of these things.
Yeah, so again, the key takeaway here, leave it blank by default, but make sure that, again, the user is giving them the most relevant information.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a bonus principle for everyone here. I know we've talked a lot about design, a lot about user experience and UI, but we can't forget about functionality either, right? So there's a saying amongst developers that the heaviness of the design keeps the performance from being a first-class citizen, right? We believe that if you optimize things up front, speed can be design's best friend, not necessarily its enemy, right? So if we look at a couple use cases here, let's talk about the business impact of speed. So in a keynote given at Google HQ, we found that if the Google search page ran 2% slower, we had 2% fewer searches per user. And obviously with searches in the billions a day, right? That's a lot of searches, right?
Yeah.
So 2% is not nothing. For Amazon, for example, there was a synopsis posted on O'Reilly Media that talked about 100 milliseconds faster for these pages led to 1% more revenue. Obviously, Amazon's a huge company. That's not nothing in terms of revenue either. And again, for relevancy in the advertising industry, if we look at GQ, when they made their mobile site 80% faster, they saw a 108% increase in ad interaction rate as well. So again, considering what you can do up front to start optimizing speed and optimizing functionality is also going to help improve overall results when coupled with effective design.
Yeah, and as you can see here, page speed is a ranking signal in Google organic search results. and there are tons of tools that you can always look up. So making sure that speed is a priority, as you can see here, like the several examples from the very large companies, but what you can do for your clients and make sure that their website is not only mobile friendly, but really fast. Nobody wants a lot of content that takes forever to load. So striking that balance between the two, I think, will really benefit you and your clients.
Yep.
All right, so this again, we're gonna go ahead and see if we were able to get those questions up here. Just give us one quick second, like
let's have a look, guys.
We mentioned that there was a little bit of a technical issue going on with us. All right, so it looks like we are able to pull up questions at this time, unfortunately. So in this case, if you do still have questions at the end of this, again, please feel free to use any of AdWords resources. We have numerous resources here, talking to an online specialist like Ian and myself via the phone, chat, or email. You can get expert advice on the actual advertiser community, as well as we have a huge presence on social media. We do have a social media team. So go ahead and tweet us, YouTube comments,
Facebook,
Google+. Again, all of the social media, Google is all over it. So feel free to use any of these forums to get more information about your mobile-friendly websites.
Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next time, okay?